Good day, class. I welcome you all again to another session on the life and writings of Rizal. For Module 6, we will now be focusing on Topic 2, which contains the propaganda movement, the La Solidaridad, and the La Liga Filipina. So before we will proceed with the discussion on the propaganda movement, I'd like to ask, how are you doing in your own houses? I hope that you are staying safe and you are doing well in your online classes. So again, class, if you have questions, feel free to ask your instructors about some aspects of the flow of the discussion as well as some aspects of your Moodle virtual classes. So let us proceed with Topic 2. So for Topic 2, we will focus on the propaganda movement. Okay, so what is the propaganda movement all about? Let us proceed to the next slide. As you can see on your slide, we have three very important ilustrados. And these ilustrados are the forefront of the propaganda movement. We have Dr. Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Haina. They organized the propaganda movement, which was a peaceful crusade for reforms. So a little backgrounder about the propaganda movement, and if you could still remember the ilustrados during the 19th century, education was not afforded to all Filipinos. However, if you are a son of a principalia, a middle-class Filipino, or a wealthy Filipino, the good effects of that status is that children were being afforded good education, not only in the Philippines, but most of them were sent abroad. And looking into the screen, we have three best examples of the ilustrados: Rizal, Del Pilar, and Haina. Now, when the ilustrados came to Spain, they realized that there are a lot of privileges that are not being accorded to the Filipinos in the Philippines. With their very liberal-minded education in Spain, they began to understand that if the Spaniards and the Filipinos in Spain has this kind of freedom and independence, why not apply it in the Philippines? So these patriots were called propagandists because they waged their movement by means of pen and tongue to expose the defects of Spanish rule in the Philippines and the urgency of reforms to remedy them. The writings of the ilustrados in Spain would serve as an opener to the Spanish government that there are a lot of injustices happening in the Philippines that these Spaniards failed to see and failed to remedy. So the goal now of the ilustrados, especially the patriots, is to write the conditions, the deplorable conditions of the Filipinos in the Philippines so that Spain will remedy them. One of the breakthrough of the propaganda movement was the La Solidaridad. What about the La Solidaridad? Before I'll discuss in detail the La Solidaridad, there are very important aims of the propaganda movement. Number one, equality of Filipinos and the Spaniards before the law. In the 19th century, there is no equality between the Filipinos and the Spaniards. The Filipinos were not called Filipinos, but Indios. Why Indios? Because it's a general term for people who are being discovered, and eventually they were called Indios. In short, the term Filipinos were not accorded to the Indios, but only accorded to the Spaniards who are either born in Spain or also born in the Philippines. In short, there is no equality because if you are a black-skinned, flat-nosed Filipino, and then you are inferior in the eyes of the law. Second, they also aim with assimilation of the Philippines as a regular province of Spain. So this is very important discussion, class. When Rizal, together with some ilustrados and patriots, arrived in the Philippines, their aim was assimilation, not really complete independence, because assimilation would mean that the Philippines will become a province of Spain. So what's the aim? Bakit kinakailangang maging province siya? just like in a normal government setup. When you are a province of the Philippines, you will be given equal privileges and equal rights with all the Filipinos or the people living in that state. So according to Rizal and some other patriots, if the Philippines will become a province of Spain, then whatever are the rights and privileges granted to the Spaniards in Spain and in the Philippines would also be given to the Filipinos in the Philippines. Simply put, it would put the Filipinos in equal footing with the Spaniards, either they are in Spain or in the Philippines. Let's proceed to the third aim. The restoration of the Philippine representation in the Cortes, which is the law-making body of Spain. So it is again interrelated, class, to our first and second aim. Why? Because before, we have this representation in the Spanish Cortes, but due to the change of decision, because there are also incidents that happened in the past that allowed the Spanish lawmaking body of Spain to stop the representation. Now, the propaganda movement wanted representation because if we have representation in the lawmaking body or the Congress of Spain, then there is a voice for the Filipinos. The Filipinos can now voice out what we need as a nation and what the Filipinos, on the condition of the Filipinos in the Philippines, will also be raised in the Congress or in the Spanish Cortes. By doing so, the Spaniards would hear the cry and the plight of the ordinary Filipinos who has no equal protection in the law, no equal justice, and some other injustices and oppression committed by the Spaniards in the Philippines will be heard by the Spanish monarchy in Spain. Let's go to the fourth aim. The Philippinization of the Philippine parishes. I think if you were able to have a thorough understanding of topic 1, which is campaign for nationalism, you will understand that the Philippinization or the secularization of the Philippine parishes can be best explained during the incident of the execution of the Gumborza. And that the only aim of the clergy or the Filipino clergy during that time is to give equal opportunity to the Filipino clergy to man the parishes so that a more distinct and a more fitting role of the Catholic faith will be given to the Filipinos. By doing so, the Filipinos, especially the Filipino clergy, will take part in the administration of the religious affairs of the Filipinos in the country. And to the fifth aim of the propaganda movement, it talks about the individual liberties for the Filipinos. Why? Because going back to our previous aims class, if the Filipinos will be represented, if we will be assimilated if we will be assimilated to Spain, and we will have equal opportunities and privileges being granted by Spain, then the kind of independence and freedom that the Filipinos deserve should be given to them during the 19th century. So before we will proceed with the discussion on the propaganda movement, I'd like to ask, how are you doing in your own houses? I hope that you are staying safe and you are doing well in your online classes. So again, class, if you have questions, feel free to ask your instructors about some aspects of the flow of the discussion, as well as some aspects of your Moodle virtual classes. So let us proceed with topic 2. So for topic 2, we will focus on the propaganda movement. Despite the failure of the propaganda movement, it was not all put into waste because the ideas of freedom and justice, which it sowed, paved the ground for the Philippine Revolution that the Katipunan and Andres Bonifacio begun in the hills of Balintawak in August 1896. In short, class, if Spain did not remedy the deplorable conditions of the Filipinos in Spain, the other audience of the propaganda movement, such as the Filipinos like Bonifacio and other liberal-minded Filipinos in the Philippines, it opened their eyes to the need of the Filipinos to come up with an independent country. And so while Rizal was in Hong Kong, Rizal conceived the idea of establishing a civic organization or association. So Is it safe to say that because of the failure of La Solidaridad, Rizal thought of creating the La Liga? I think the only difference was that the La Solidaridad is a propaganda movement. It dwells about righting the deplorable conditions of the Filipinos. And because it failed, Rizal thought that there is also a need to come up with a civic organization which would focus on the social aspects of the Filipinos. And that he wrote the Constitution with the help of Jose Maria Basa. And when he was exiled thereafter, he also finished the Constitution, and thereafter he returned to Manila. So what is the La Liga Filipina all about? So class, I'd like to present to you the aims of the League so that you will thoroughly understand the notion behind the creation of the La Liga Filipina. Number one, union of the Philippine archipelago into a compact, strong, and homogeneous body. And when we talk about the union of the Philippine archipelago, Rizal wanted to have a unified members who are geared towards liberating the country. But again, the League does not want a violent revolution. They wanted a peaceful revolution through the different activities of the La Liga Filipina. Second, mutual protection of the members, because as soon as you became a member of the League, you are protected with all the different policies within the League. And third, defense against all violence and injustice, considering that the 19th century was a century of biases and oppression to the Filipinos, and the La Liga thought that it is a civic platform that would help the Filipinos be defended against the different versions of oppressions in the community. Fourth, encouragement of education, agriculture, and commerce. With this part of the aims of the League class, I guess it's very fitting to understand that when the League was created, there were also issues with the land situation, especially in Calamba. And because of this League and through the help of Rizal, they were able to contribute to the recommendations as to what should be done in the farming situation in Calamba, and that they were able to give recommendations such that most of the proceeds of the taxes coming from these lands were not really used for the improvement of the community, but these were all used by the friars, and the friars did not contribute to the development of the towns. In short, class, the fourth aim really had its purpose, because if the La Solidaridad focused on writing, the La Liga Filipina focused on applying these theories to the civic activities in the Philippines. And last, study and application of reforms, because they are not anymore about theories and writing the deplorable conditions. They wanted to take part on the change that should be done in the Philippines. Just like the La Solidaridad and the propaganda movement, why again the La Liga Filipina ended? So Rizal's exile to Dapitan proved to be the swan song of the propaganda movement. The La Liga Filipina collapsed, and the radical Andres Bonifacio and other radical members separated from it, for they were disenchanted by the peaceful campaign. So let me give you a very quick explanation as to why the La Liga Filipina split. Andres Bonifacio, a member of the La Liga Filipina, did not join the Compromesores, who were conservative intellectuals. So in short, class, there was a split of the members of the La Liga Filipina. Those who wanted a peaceful reform joined the Compromesorios, while those who wanted a violent revolution became a member of the Katipunan, and the same organization that Andres Bonifacio had built after the split and after the La Liga Filipina died out. So because he firmly believed that the happiness and welfare of the Filipino people could not be achieved by peaceful request for reforms, but by a violent revolution. So all in all, looking into how Andres Bonifacio was able to create the Katipunan, or the kataas-taasang kagalang-galangang Katipunan, it now speaks of the ideals of the Katipunan. All throughout the propaganda movement, there's only one very consistent aim, and they wanted a peaceful way of initiating their demands to the Spanish government. However, the Filipinos, such as the members of the Katipunan, now believe that there's already a long fight between peaceful reform and that the best way to end the Spanish colony in the Philippines is through a violent revolution. Having said that, class, what is now the relevance of the propaganda movement to history? Going back to our discussion as a wrap-up of all the things we've discussed today, we realize that the propaganda movement were composed of enlightened, educated Filipinos. So what do I mean by enlightened, educated Filipinos? That most of the Filipinos who engage in the platform for reform were those educated Filipinos who believe that there are privileges that they witness in Spain that are not endowed to the Filipinos in the Philippines. And if not because of these patriots, and if not because of these ilustrados, the deplorable conditions of the Philippines will not be put into words, will not be written in history, and it will not be read by you students today. So, what is the importance of these educated Filipinos? People like Rizal, Marcelo H. del Pilar, Graciano Lopez Haina, who campaigned for peaceful revolution, gave us the idea that indeed pen is mightier than sword. And their campaign for writing and exposing these conditions paved way for the Filipinos, especially in the Philippines, to see that indeed, ito yung nangyayari sa Pilipinas. And these are the things that we can also try to answer and try to change in our own country. Even if the audience of the compatriots were initially the Spaniards, but they were not able only to influence the Spaniards. They were able as well to influence the Filipinos, especially Andres Bonifacio and the Katipunan. So, what is the relevance of all those things into your own condition as a student in this subject? I think the word education is really vital in understanding what is the current condition of the country. The same reason why you are enrolled in this course, because there are a lot of lessons in history that you can glean on and try to appreciate and try to amend. And if you just thoroughly understand that education can help a lot in changing the country, I think you can make use of the example of the Ilustrados and the propaganda movement. That after all, it's not just sword, it's not just combating the Spaniards, but we have to thank our forefathers, educated forefathers who are members of the Ilustrados, for espousing the deplorable conditions of the Filipinos. So class, I think that's a wrap for our topic 2 on the La Solidaridad and the La Liga Filipina. And I hope that you are still doing well inside your own homes. Please do not forget to wash your hands, stay safe, and always maintain social distancing. Again, remember, if you have any question, you may just post it in the inquiry concern section of your own Moodle platform or reserve it during your synchronous classes. Have a good day, everyone.